I'm Tiffany Lashmet, Extension Agricultural Law Specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. As part of a grant-funded program from the Southern Extension Risk Management Education Center, we recently held a webinar featuring a number of producers who do direct beef sales here in the state of Texas. We wanted to provide that webinar recording to you because they offered such great information, insights, and advice. So what you're going to find in the following video is a recording of that webinar featuring Megan Foote, John Taggert, and Stephen and Amanda Little. We would ask that if you view the webinar, you please do us a huge favor and take the online evaluation. I promise it's quick and painless, but it's very important to us for our grant report back to the funder so that we're able to do additional programs like this. We'll have a QR code you can scan and take the evaluation on your phone. We'll also put a link to the evaluation in the show notes below. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoy our Where's the Beef Direct Beef Panel webinar. A couple of introductions and then we'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, I want to take just a minute and thank our panelists today. We've got 3 panelists that are going to be joining us. We're thrilled to have them here. We've got Megan Foote. Megan is with Foote Family Meats, and they kind of straddle the Texas-New Mexico line. They've got a storefront in Clovis, New Mexico. We've got John Taggert with us. He's from Burgundy Pasture Beef in Grandview, Texas. And we're going to have Amanda Little joining us. She's from Little Cattle Company in Argyle, Texas. And so we want to thank them so much for their willingness to be on the webinar and to share their knowledge and insights with us today. We also want to thank our grant funder. That is the Southern Extension Education Risk Management Center. They're the ones who provided the funding for this, and without them, we would not be able to do any of our Where's the Beef family of products. So thank you for that. Just a couple of other resources we have available for direct beef sales businesses. A couple of years ago, we wrote a handbook that really focuses on the legal and economic issues related to direct beef sales. Casey Mathke, who works with me, is going to be doing all the wizardry behind the scenes here, and she's going to put a link to that handbook in the chat box, and that way you'll have it. We'll also send everyone an email after this webinar is completed with all the links that we share and with a recording to the webinar if you'd like to watch it later. That handbook is available to download for free. We're going to just give you that PDF link. If you want a hard copy, you can order those from my office, and we'll put that information in the email. I also want to mention a video series. This is the grant-funded part of this project where we went around Texas and recorded about 7 or 8 different videos with folks involved in different areas of direct beef sales. Then we've edited those and we've posted them on YouTube for you to watch again for free anytime. We talked to a number of different beef producers that do a variety of different approaches to direct beef sales. So we talked to folks that have storefronts and folks that ship beef online. We talked to folks who only sell wholes, halves, and quarters. We talked to conventional producers. We talked to grass-fed producers. We talked to a packing plant operator about what he's seen that has worked and not worked for people. Casey even went to Austin and talked to employees at the licensing authority here in Texas for direct beef sales. So lots of great information is available there. And again, Casey's going to post a link in our chat box. The other thing I want to mention is we've got an evaluation, and we'll put that in the chat as well. You'll see that pop up in the chat 3 or 4 times, and then we'll include it in that email that we send. For our grant funder, getting evaluation data hugely important, and so we would ask that you please take the time to fill that out. I promise it is not super in-depth. It won't take a ton of time, but it's extremely helpful for us as we go back and do our reports for the grant funder. So with that, I think that is all of the opening comments that I have. Oh, one more thing. We absolutely want you to be able to ask questions of the panelists. We're going to do that a couple of ways. So the first thing we'll do, and probably the easiest way to ask your question, if you'll just type it in the chat box. So on your Zoom down at the bottom, you'll see 3 little dots. If you click on that, you can click on chat. You can type your question there, and I'm going to read those questions to our panelists to make sure we get them answered. A couple of times throughout the webinar, I will give you an opportunity to unmute your microphone and ask your question. So if you'd prefer to do it that way, that'll be an option as well. I'll stop 2 or 3 times as we go along and announce when we're going to have time for that. All right, so with that, I'm going to get us started here and ask our panelists if you'll each please introduce yourselves and then give us kind of an overview of your direct sales business. While you all do that, Casey is going to put links to your website in the chat. So if you all want to go and check them out or learn more about each of them, you'll be able to do that. Megan, let's start with you.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. My name is Megan Foote. My husband Garrett and I own and operate Foote Family Meats in Clovis, New Mexico. So like Tiffany said, we're just right on the state line, pretty close to the Lubbock and Amarillo areas. But we serve a really wide base of customers throughout Eastern New Mexico and West Texas. So not a huge town, about 30,000 people. There's an Air Force base here, but we are kind of considered a shopping hub for a lot of rural communities, which has allowed us to really launch quickly into this business. So my husband's family has been in the cattle business for 80 plus years, primarily focused on stocker cattle, but we run a little bit of cow-calf, primarily stockers. And then since 2020, when we launched our beef business, we've been getting deeper and deeper into the finishing side of the cattle business as well. So right now we have a storefront that's located in Clovis, but our business started in 2020 when we moved back to join the family operation. And my husband and I were looking for a way to diversify our income outside of running cattle with his family. And so like a lot of people, 2020 was kind of a launching pad to direct consumer meat sales. And we just found that, you know, we were getting all of these calls for wholes and halves, but there was a lot of people who either couldn't afford that investment up front, or they didn't understand how much space it was going to take up, but they would have bought 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds in between there. And so that was when we decided we're going to send, you know, a few extra head off on every load, get them cut down into individual cuts and sell those as boxes. And then we opened up a website. We started, we had a mobile trailer that we took around, and we did that for about 2 years until we built up enough of a customer base to move into having an actual storefront. And so that's our main focus now, is selling our beef fresh, but we've also got into selling other proteins that we source as well. So we're selling beef, pork, chicken. We fly in fresh seafood from Florida once a month. We sell locally raised lamb, eggs, other local seasonings and marinades and stuff that are locally produced either in New Mexico or the West Texas area. And then we've recently been making a shift where we're moving more into the wholesale side. So we sell our beef into the school districts and food banks throughout the state of New Mexico. We recently just landed a deal with K-Bob's Steakhouse in Clovis. So we're doing more on the restaurant side and working to get our facility USDA inspected here in the near future.
Awesome. Megan, thank you so much. I'm sure folks will have lots of questions for you, so stand by and we'll get to the question portion here in just a second. John, we're going to go to you. I know you were having some trouble with your camera, so we may not be able to see your face, but I think we can hear your voice.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. Yeah, it's technical issues beyond my control, and that's not very big area of control. So anyway, we operate Burgundy Pasture Beef. We recently changed the name to Burgundy Pasture Meats, but we've been doing it a long time, since 1999. It's strictly 100% grass-fed on the beef. In addition to the beef, we do pastured pork. We also have a poultry operation in Hillsboro, Texas, about 30 miles from Grandview, where our beef offices and processing plant are, where we do pastured chicken, and we have a USDA inspected processing plant at the poultry operation. In addition to the beef that all comes off our ranches, and then we source pastured pork from East Texas, and then we do lamb, and then similar to Megan, we do cheese, eggs, spices, and a lot of other little items that kind of go along with what we do. We have a storefront in Dallas and a storefront in Fort Worth and a storefront in Grandview where our beef processing plant is. We strictly do direct retail. We don't do much wholesale. We've done some food bank business, but very little wholesale, and there's reasons for that I can get into later if somebody wants to know. Do very little restaurant business. We do some custom processing, but we're phasing that out in our beef plant. I mean, we still do some custom processing, but not much. We do more custom processing in our chicken operation in our poultry plant because that's a whole different dynamic and quite frankly more profitable to do custom poultry. That's about it.
Tiffany, you're muted.
That was bound to happen to somebody. It might as well be me. I'm sure we're gonna have lots of questions for you, John. Thank you so much for that introduction. I also think that we may have Stephen or Amanda Little on from Little Cattle Company. Stephen or Amanda, are you here yet? They may be joining us a little bit later. So we're going to put a pin in that. And when they are able to get on, we'll add them to our panelist list. Okay. So I've got just a couple of questions. And like I say, for everyone else, please put your questions in the chat box. We are certainly glad to ask those. We want your questions answered as much as anything today. One question I've got both for John and for Megan is, what is one thing you wished you knew when you got started doing direct-to-consumer meat sales? John, you're kind of like the grandfather of this. You've been around since 1999. So what have you learned in the last 25 years that you wish you'd have known at the beginning?
How much time do you have?
Yeah.
I'll do this as a kind of a caution to people, and what I think the biggest obstacle in doing this is, and that is selling the entire carcass. Because we've done a lot of custom processing over the last 25 years, and we've done it for small cottage producers that sell in farmers markets or sell for themselves. And the biggest mistake I see them make is not address the issue of selling the whole carcass, and then more specifically in ground beef. Ground beef is it's an interesting thing because it's not only the highest volume item you get, but therefore probably the most difficult to sell it all. But then on the other hand, it's your highest revenue because of the volume. So addressing that ground beef sales at a profitable price would probably be what I would think would be the most important thing amongst a lot of others, but that would be my number one.
Okay. Well, I think that's interesting, John. As we did these interviews, both for the handbook and then for the video series, if you were going to ask me the most common thing people said, there were two of them, and one of them is exactly that, trying to manage the inventory and move the ground beef. So do you have a tip for folks if they're trying to figure that out? Any ideas of what might work there or what's worked for you all?
Well, I'm going to say, before they really get started, to kind of explore the market and establish what their market is and what they want to do. In selling wholes and halves, which we do not do for a reason, but it's as Megan indicated, people don't realize how much meat they're going to get, and nowadays, as high as beef is, how expensive that's going to be to buy a whole cow. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to get a lot of stuff that they probably really don't want in the end, the stuff that piles up in the bottom of the freezer. So if you kind of define your market and do some research and do some communication, because people get excited when a restaurant wants to buy their steaks. And well, 15 to 20% of that carcass is going to be your prime steaks. and then you have to deal with everything else. So if they can establish a market for that going in, or at least know what path they want to go down, it'd be a big step towards success.
Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, Megan, I would like for you to comment first on what John said, and then I want you to give us that something you wish you guys would have known 4 years ago when you got started.
Yeah, so similar to John, I think I've got like a laundry list of learning experiences, and sometimes that's better than, or that's more useful to share with people than what went right was all of the all of the things that you struggled through and kind of came out on the other side of. But
Yeah.
yes, inventory management, I think that was one of our biggest hurdles starting off, and it still is one of those things that you have to really, really keep a close eye on all the time. And there's a lot of different fluctuations and risks as your business grows that you face when it comes to inventory management. But that would be the number one thing that I would have to say that we've seen other people who are entering into the business. That's been their biggest hurdle, and kind of one of the reasons that they end up having to close up shop is because that ground beef they're selling through all of their steaks, and killing more cattle to meet that demand, but the ground beef inventory just piles and piles and piles, and you either A, that's a lot of cash flow tied up, or B, you start to run out of storage space for it. And so a couple of things that we did to mitigate that, we're in a little bit more of a unique position. It was a challenge for us in the beginning. One of the things that we did to try to help to start move that inventory was we made the decision of, okay, we figured out what was our break even. We gave ourselves a small cushion there, and we kept our ground beef price at that pretty close to break even. We gave ourselves just a little bit of a markup there for some error or some loss, but we really don't make a lot of money off of our ground beef. We pad that into the margins on our other cuts that there is such a high demand for, because what we found was a lot of people are willing to pay more for locally raised beef when it comes to those middle meat cuts. They're a little less particular about it. Not everyone, but for the general public, as we started moving more volumes and killing more cattle, that they were willing to keep buying their ground beef from the grocery store, but they'd come buy their steaks from us. And so we kept our ground beef as low as possible. That helped us a little bit. And then what we started having to do was get really serious about, as John said, when you're starting off your business, it's really, really important to kind of set clear goals and figure out who's your target market and what niche do you fall into. But not all of your products are going to move through that target market, is what we found. So our target market was, people who are looking for really high quality, that high choice to prime quality middle meats, and they were willing to spend a little bit more money. And so how are we going to get rid of all of the other parts of the beef, the bones, the fat, the offal products, the things that could typically go into trash, but if you can pick up a few dollars here and there, makes a big impact. And so what we were able to do is the state of New Mexico has a grant program called New Mexico Grown. And I think there's some similar programs from what I've heard from some of these other discussions that I've had with people in Texas. I think the food banks and maybe the schools do something similar, but basically the state of New Mexico incentivizes the schools, the food banks, senior centers, and daycare centers to use this grant funding to specifically buy products, and now protein in particular, that meets a threshold of qualifications to be considered New Mexico grown. So they have to meet 4 out of the 5 categories of being born bred, fed, finished, harvested, and completely owned by a New Mexico rancher. And so that was huge for us. That was a big turning point for us as we started and moved into the fresh side of our business, because pretty much overnight we did not have any ground beef. And then we were pushing to get rid of other cuts in order to be able to kill more cattle to meet what the demand we now had for ground beef. And I've seen that translate also as we opened the store and we switched to more of like a small specialty grocery store setting. Offering ground beef fresh and even frozen We have a really hard time now that we are set up in a location where it's more convenient for people to come in and shop as they need something. Whether they're picking up a box of ground beef or 1 or 2 pounds for dinner that night, the accessibility of our business now has allowed us to be able to move some of those lower end or lower value cuts. So those are just a couple of things from an inventory management standpoint. And then, and that's one that I think every time I've done one of these with you, Tiffany, that's like the number one thing that I always touch on, but trying to find some other stuff that I think I wish that we knew or had a little bit more clarity on, was our vision and our goal for the business. When we started it, was kind of a fly by the seat of our pants deal. And I decided to quit my job and we were going to do this and go all in. But I don't know that we had a really, really clear direction on where we saw it going. When we started, we thought, oh, everybody's doing the online deal and shipping. And so we kind of put all of our eggs in that basket. And we had our local pickup as well, but we really just kind of assumed that the nationwide shipping and the online store was going to be our big launching pad. And it was, and it worked for a while, but it really plateaued. And so I think had we sat down and really looked at where the gaps were within our community, and what types of products people were looking for and what they were willing to spend. And for us, we figured that out, but it was 2 years down the road. When we started realizing people in our local community, we've got a Walmart and we've got an Albertsons. And, it's a great source for fresh, safe meats that, majority of our cattle that we raise go into grocery stores around the country. But there were a lot of people who were looking for like really high quality prime cuts. And so they were driving all the way to Amarillo or to Lubbock, which is about an hour and a half away. So there were several people in our community that were driving all the way to Midland, Texas, to stock up on meats because they felt like they couldn't find that quality anywhere close by. And so that was where we started to really kind of listen and learn and figure out, okay, if we can kind of bridge that gap and offer similar type products here and keep those dollars within our local economy, there might be a bigger opportunity for us than what we've been seeing online. And so looking back, I wish that we would have, my husband and I would have sat down and we said yes to a lot of things and pivoted a lot, which I think is important early on, no matter what in a business, to kind of figure out, which direction is right for you. You're not going to know all of the answers from the get-go, but I think sitting down and kind of establishing a vision or a direction can really help, especially when it comes to, not spending a lot of money on things that maybe weren't necessary.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Okay, Stephen, I think you are here now, and I'm guessing you may have some insight on this as well. So, Stephen, tell us.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit. I can. Tell us a little bit about Little Cattle Company, and then you can launch into your answer to our question.
Perfect. I'm just going to flip on my camera and say hi, and then turn it off and set my phone down because I'm driving.
Perfect. Safety first.
So, yes, I appreciate y'all having us on. Amanda, my wife's actually we run this business together. She's going to take over here in a second. We're running 2 different directions in the Metroplex today. Right now, she's picking up dry ice and about to start shipping beef all over the country. And I'm handling some other stuff. So it's just one of those days. I'll jump in here at the beginning and then she'll take over in a little bit. But we actually launched our website 1 year ago. 1 year ago tomorrow. So September 10th, 2023 is when we went live selling retail cuts. To back up a little bit, I grew up right in the heart of DFW in the city. But I had 2 grandparents that were involved in agriculture, whether that be for hobby or for business. And so I kind of got to grow up around cattle and horses and different farming and gardening and all different kinds of things, which really sparked my love for that. And my grandfather raised Rangus cattle in Decatur, Texas, and he would harvest some for the family every year, fill our freezers. And so I grew up with beef from grandpa in my freezer all the time. And it was just, you can't, as everyone on this call knows, you can't beat what that's like. And so when Amanda and I had our first child, as I should say, as he got older, he shut that operation down. And so we didn't have access to that anymore. And then I had my first child 8 years ago, my wife. His name's Brody. And Brody, when he was, I don't know, roughly 6 months old, he ate meat for the first time. Like you start introducing foods to babies. And it was actually venison that Amanda had harvested. And I was so excited that he was eating that. And at the same time, so burdened for the other meat that we had access to when we weren't hunting. And so I called my uncle who ranches in Abilene and was just talking to him. And he was like, Steven, I have exactly the cattle you're wanting. You know, I have, you know, these cattle, you know, Angus cattle, and we don't do hormones and steroids. Different people do that, and it's totally fine. But it's what the way I wanted to do it. And so, anyways, I started partnering with him back in 2017, and I would just buy a couple steers from him every year, and then we'd put them on a grain finish at the end, and the grass fed their whole life, and then grain finish at the end, and I'd divide them up among a few friends and family, and we would sell halves, just completely as a hobby. And mine and Amanda's goal was to just pay for the meat, for our own meat, for a year, and we did that successfully. And the demand started growing, and you know, kind of we had many years learning the business, and so we decided, our best friends put some money in, and we decided to start marketing and to do this, like to sell beef year round. And so, you know, I tried to do this also, Tiffany. This is like, I think I'm one of the best testimonies for Where's the Beef program, because I tried to do this in 2019. I was like, I was going to do it. I was all geared up. I spent a couple weeks making calls like to Austin, to like everywhere I could, and try web searches like galore, and no one would give me a straight answer on where I had to store the meat, what licenses I had to have. I mean, like I had a full business plan in place. I was going full bore, and I couldn't get answers to like, so the questions I had, like, could I store this beef out of my garage and ship it there? One guy said no. I talked to someone down in Austin, and he said no, but if I boarded off the door to my garage to the house, I could. Like, I got all these weird answers. And so my other business started demanding a lot of my time. It was good. I had a lot of growth. And so it was just a natural thing to just drop trying to sell beef retail, because I couldn't find information. And so we decided in 2022 that we wanted to like take a stab at it again. And I started Googling, and the top hit, like first Google search top hit, Where's the Beef ebook, downloaded it, started reading it. And I was like, Amanda, every single question I've ever had is answered right here with links and like phone numbers, people to call. And so we started diving through it, and it was literally the best cheat code. So Little Cattle Co. was built 100% off the advice of Where's the Beef, and that was our guidebook. And then to further that, I called in to order a hard copy, and Tiffany, your assistant, told me about the live meetings. And so I drove down to Conroe, which was by no means close to me, and I got to meet Megan, and she helped us big time with like some of the shipping stuff, because we're a shipping model, and she did a lot of that. And so she helped us in a lot of ways, probably more than she realizes. And then even just kind of getting to watch her on social media and their company and what they do. So we're a year in, we've sold well over $100,000 worth of beef in our first year. And it absolutely is, the whole process is way more expensive than what we thought it would be.
Yeah.
Right. It's so expensive. We've had fun. We've learned a ton. Now I came in prepped. My wife's really good on, in my opinion, on social media and all that kind of stuff. And so Amanda, who y'all hear from a little bit, she runs our social media. So we knew like the stuff y'all are hearing, I'd heard this from you guys and other people previously. And so we just doubled down on the ground beef thing, and we started educating online as much as we could. We created these really beautiful little like 5x7 cards that we put in every order, talking about why you should buy ground beef from Little Cattle Co. and stop buying it from the grocery store. All the different stats that are shared like at the live events, and how many different DNA strands can be found in a pound of ground beef from the grocery store, and just all the little things, and put together what we thought was a really appealing kind of educational program. And then on any order that people placed with us that didn't order ground beef, we would throw a free pound in and write a handwritten note like, hey, we wanted you to try this. We did that for the first couple months, and we have created such a demand. Ground beef sells out before anything for us. And we did to kind of top that off, we did, in our ground beef's priced extremely premium. Like right now, we just had to move it up a little bit, and I can talk about that more in a second. But it's like, I mean, we sell for $11 a pound, and it's the first thing that goes. And we created a ground beef subscription. It's the only thing we do it's a set box or a subscription. Everything else is completely a la carte, which was a big thing that I thought was different. Seth made us, it's a little harder on us, but I think it makes us appealing. Just like you could walk into Megan's store and you could buy whatever you want. You could buy 10 ribeyes if you wanted to cook a ribeye for everyone that was coming over. You know, a lot of beef companies, they do these set boxes and you're really locked into that specific box. And I wanted it to be wide open, but we have a ground beef subscription. And so that subscription, we had to turn it off a long time ago. So it's like closed. You know, we could sell a lot more ground beef on subscription it's like a monthly thing. It goes out 10 pounds, 15 pounds, 20 pounds. And so we could sell a lot more if we did. And so we kind of created the reverse problem of we need more ground beef. But at the same time, we had to, like, recently we just had to adjust our price up a little bit because kind of like the first gentleman was talking, you know, is just everything is going to be a little bit more expensive than you think. And it is so much of your yield is going to come. And we also doubled down on that problem. So just like you said, all the pieces at the bottom of the freezer, anything that's not like a prime cut, we throw into the ground beef. And so, I mean, all the like cutlets and round steaks and all the roasts, literally all the roasts, like it all, and seasonally we'll do chuck roasts, but we put so much. And if it's not like a recognizable cut that someone like the average mom or pop knows how to cook, we put it in ground beef. Because I know I knew that it was a big problem to sell ground beef, but I also know every American family cooks ground beef every week, like spaghetti and burgers and tacos and taco bowls. And so we knew that like that would make, you know, we wanted every cut that we sold, since we were selling retail, to be really approachable, something that people would cook regularly.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Stephen, so much for joining us. I know you may have to jump off. I see Amanda is on, so we'll let the littles come and go as you need to. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you so much. You got to hear at some point, make sure to ask her about what we've been doing with the tallow and our skincare. It's really cool.
Oh, it's on my list. Yeah, for sure. Awesome.
Cool.
Okay, Megan, we have a question for you. Melissa says that they've got a goal to have a similar setup to your local store. And her question is, your prime cuts that are fresh, are they never frozen, or do you sell them frozen? How do people buy those in the store?
Yeah, so that's a great question. They buy them both ways. So when we send our stuff off to the processor to get harvested, we send them a cut sheet and have them break down our beef into like boxed cuts. So just like a grocery store would get a case of 5 or 6 rib rolls, that's how we are receiving it. And then I have a team of butchers who are breaking things down fresh. The only stuff that we receive back from the processing plant that's frozen is some of our ground beef. And then some of the ground beef I'll get done into like 5 or 10 pound chubs, because I may already have that contracted out to the school districts or somebody in food service. And then sometimes I'll have them done in 1 and 2 pound packs. And I do that for 2 reasons. Some of those 1 pounders go to the food bank. Some of them come back into our store because it helps take some of that labor burden off of us to meet the ground beef demand that we now have, so that we're not chubbing thousands and thousands of pounds each week. Because we do go through quite a bit of ground beef now. So ground beef and offal are the only things that are frozen. Everything else we receive back by the pallet load, and they're large pieces of beef that are coming in fresh. So we're keeping back similar. When we started, it was very similar to what Stephen had mentioned, where, you know, we were keeping all the recognizable cuts and the odds and ends were getting thrown into ground beef. So they didn't just stack up in the freezer. We now have the opportunity we try to keep back as much of the beef and red meat intact as possible, because now that we have a fresh store, we have more versatility of how to move stuff. So for example, early on, we would grind a lot of stuff from the round, because we would sell mostly chuck roast, a little bit of round roast, hardly any round steaks, cube steaks. It was hit or miss. It was really hard for us to get that product moved. Now I will sometimes run out of the round, depending on the time of the year, before I run out of ribeyes. We're slicing it for jerky meat. We are running it through the dicer for a cheaper option on street taco meats. We're doing cube steak. We're doing London broils. We have such a more diverse customer base now with our storefront than what we had before. Which is great because it allows us to serve, that original target market of people coming in for prime ribeyes, but then also people who want to serve their families fresh homegrown meat, but they're looking for more of a value-based purchase. So the versatility on that's really great. Now what happens is we cut that stuff fresh each morning, put it out on the counter. If for some reason it's a slow day and some of those cuts don't sell, what we'll do is we will take them out of the counter. We vacuum seal everything that's taken out of the counter, and then it goes into some reach-in freezers in the store. And they go into baskets. And then we have a little bundle deal that we do all the time because people come in and they want to buy meat by the box or some sort of pre-done deal. And we just tell them, if you buy 5 to 15 pounds, you get this percentage off. If you're getting 16 to 25 pounds, you get this much off. And that really helps us to kind of make a dent in our freezer inventory so we don't have a bunch of product stacking up in the freezer, because when you have a fresh meat market, everyone's always going to prefer to buy the fresh steak over the frozen steak. So in order to keep that inventory moving, we have to offer some sort of a deal. And so we have that also kind of worked into our pricing model as well, so that we can be able to offer a little bit of a discount once that product moves to the freezer.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Megan. Okay. Here's a question. I want to ask this one, and I'll let anybody jump in. I'll give my thoughts as well. Ginger says that they have Dexter cattle and they're looking to start very, very small. No pun intended, she says. Dexter cattle are simply smaller, but she says the beef is really good. Do you see a market there? So Megan, John, Amanda, if anybody has any thoughts on that, go ahead. John, I think you unmuted.
I do. On the small cattle, I'm going to caution one thing is you get small carcasses, and once that cow goes into the harvest facility, all your fixed costs are the same. Your overhead, whatever that is. So if you get a 450-pound carcass versus the normal size carcass of 750, you're not going to have near the revenue coming off that smaller carcass. So you got to make sure that those fixed costs are in line with that in mind. And then real quick, to address the fresh or the frozen, and I call it chilled, not fresh.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of try to do that so it doesn't make it sound better in some way. We stock our stores twice a week, every Tuesday and every Friday, with all chilled product goes up: chilled beef, chilled pork, chilled chicken. And then anything that hasn't sold from the previous day when we stock goes to the freezer. So in our stores, we have, in the Fort Worth store, we have the same amount of freezer space as we do chilled space. We have a little more chilled space in our Dallas store because that store was built second. I kind of learned a lesson. We needed more chilled space. But we find that with the customers we've had, and some very faithful customers now for 20 years, that they will buy the frozen. So selling the frozen then isn't as big a challenge as some people might want you to believe. In the beef business, you can't sell frozen product, and we do, and that works well. Then the other thing, the good thing about having our own retail store, is we can have sales on different products to help us move inventory at our own discretion, and that works really well for us.
Okay, that's helpful. Great. Thank you, John. The other thing, Ginger, I would say to you, I mean, I certainly think, like John said, I think that you do have the issue of the overhead costs. I definitely would look into that. I do think, though, that there's always a market. So if you've got a good product, I think do some research on that. I certainly think that there can be niche markets where, different things can work really well. So I think if you do your market research, do your analysis, kind of like Megan said, right, figure out who you think your intended customer is, and then be willing to pivot as you build that. I certainly think that there's a market for your cattle. So I think that would be my encouragement there.
I have just one quick thing to add into that.
Yeah.
So, as we've been increasing the number of head that we're killing it. And we run a conventional beef operation. So we're pasture raised, grain finished. The cattle that we are harvesting are ones that are coming out. They've been raised on pasture, and then we're moving them into our feed yard here. And we run about 180,000 head. So we're bringing in all different types of breeds and kinds of cattle. And the ones that we're finishing off and moving in, we're just cherry picking the ones that we think are going to have the best carcasses. Every now and then we've just got a full fat pen and we've got to, kill them all. And so we've run into killing some that are with smaller carcasses. And John made an excellent point there of your costs are the same, but your steaks are a lot smaller. And so one thing that we did that worked, and I still have some people ask about them. We're not killing a ton, a ton of smaller cattle to where we have enough of an inventory for it to be a continuous deal, but we marketed them as petite steaks. So I'd market them as a petite ribeye or a petite strip. And what we would do is we would try to find, okay, what else can we do to add value to that? To be able to justify it costing more than this other larger steak because we had more loss on this one. And so we might age it a little bit longer, whether that was dry aging it a little bit or wet aging it a little bit longer. On the dry age that does, shrink the meat a little bit more, but we just really had to start finding ways of, okay, how do we market this in a way that really sets it apart from what they're able to get from someone else or somewhere else. And then I think the other thing that you've really got to focus on, if you're strictly slaughtering Dexter cattle, and it's an educational thing too. So it's really, really honing in and telling your story and why your product is different from someone else's. That's going to be the key thing there.
Okay, great. Okay, I know we've got a couple more questions in the chat box. We are going to get to those. I did say I would let folks unmute and ask your question. So let's do that now. If anybody has a question, unmute your microphone and you can feel free to ask that at this point. Just in case somebody doesn't want to type, we'll give it just a minute. And I've got the 2 in the chat box, so I am going to get to those. Okay, I don't see anybody unmuting. Okay, so we're going to get to these questions in the chat box. I do want to give us 1 minute. Amanda, I think you're on now. Is that right? Amanda Little is here. There she is.
Yes, I am.
Hey, Amanda, thank you so much
I'm in
for
the
joining
car.
us. Amanda is with Little Cow
Yes,
Company. She's shipping dry ice today, I understand.
Yeah, I got in town late last night I was at a ministry event all weekend, and so we're getting a later start today, but I'm about to go get it all done.
Perfect.
So,
Hey,
yeah.
and you can feel free to turn that camera off if you need to. Amanda, I do want to just have you speak just a second about the beef tallow skincare that you guys are doing, just because that's something really unique that I don't think a lot of folks are doing currently.
Yeah, it was really cool. I began to get kind of educated on, suet and what you can do with that, specifically the suet, obviously that's I'm sure everybody here knows, but that's what you make tallow for skincare with. You could obviously render fat down from other cuts or whatever to make cooking tallow, but so we use that, and we only get about 13 pounds an animal, so not a lot. But you render it down, you get all the impurities out, and the benefits are incredible. And so I just been working on it for about 6 months. And it just kind of getting the formulas right, making sure it wasn't greasy. Sorry, I'm pulling in here to our warehouse. But tallow mimics human skin, like the molecular makeup of it. So it actually gets down to the cellular level of your skin, and it really helps your skin. So you can't make claims, but it really helps with psoriasis and eczema. It's got really rich in vitamins A, E, D, and K. It's anti-inflammatory rich. So there's just a lot of really cool benefits from it, and it's been a really fun labor of love to kind of just create these formulas that I'm reaching for instead of products with 200 ingredients and chemicals. And so we have a body butter, we have lip balms, and a lot of other things that we're working on right now. But it's just been a really cool way to utilize more of the animal that would otherwise be discarded. And I love just hearing from people all of the benefits that it's helped with them. So it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Amanda. And if you're able to stay on for more questions, feel free to. If you need to run, totally fine.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay, perfect. John, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I do. We
Okay.
we do quite a few products to increase the revenue and use that entire carcass. We do franks, hot dogs.
Mhm.
We do some stock packs, which is an interesting thing because we put some joint bones, marrow bones, neck bones, and package that up into a 10-pound, about a 10-pound package for a stock pack for somebody to make their own beef stock at home. We do out of our beef bones, we make a beef broth that we sell in 28-ounce containers. We do a chicken broth from our poultry operation where we use the chicken backs and the other stuff that otherwise go in the compost pile. We do tallow, rendered down tallow also. We do pork lard. Oh gosh, what else do? We do
Snack sticks, salami.
yeah, snack sticks, salami.
Risola.
Wendy, my partner's here next to me. A lot of stuff, a lot of different products to add revenue, and then also use up more ground beef in the hot dogs and the snack sticks and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Megan, anything you want to add on that topic? Megan, do you have anything on the idea of you kind of being creative and you making different products?
Yeah, so we are actually in the process. They covered everything. Right now, my biggest thing I would say, do not, when you're filling out your cut sheets, don't throw away those bones, especially as you're going into fall and winter. I have a 4-page wait list for knuckle and marrow bones right now. 3 months ago, they were tying up a ton of space in my freezer, and I was giving them away to a few loyal customers, that are consistent throughout the year and buying them. And as soon as I did that and we didn't have any, now tons and tons of people, I've gotten 3 emails just this morning on it. So there are markets of being able to move those things. I think it is a little bit of a balance in the beginning when you're starting off. If you don't have a ton of storage, if you're working out of chest freezers or a small walk-in or, things like that, it's managing your inventory, but also being able to manage and utilize your space too, and making sure that, you're not tying up valuable cold storage space for those cuts that do make you a little bit more money. But as you grow, and if you have the ability to be able to do it, don't leave money on the table. So marrow, bones, fat, we don't make our own tallow. We have a lot of requests for it. We're just not set up to do it in store. And since we are operating out of an actual retail store, we don't get to follow like cottage laws and things like that when it comes to, rendering it down and all of the different regulations that we would have. But we sell plenty of it, just, keeping the good white fat set aside. We'll sell it in 5 or 10 pound bags. We sell a lot of it during hunting season. People will come looking for beef fat to add in to their deer meat. And so, just, I think, be listening to your customers and they'll kind of let you know, or you can put your feelers out on your social media page and say, hey, would anyone be interested in product A, B, or C? We're looking at, maybe offering it in the next few months. And you can kind of learn, when the right time to start keeping that stuff back is. But, to John's point, a lot of those things that he listed off are things that we're looking at getting into with the snack sticks, and stuff like that. We're putting in a processing facility. We just closed on a building here, 3 or 4 months ago. So we're hoping in the next year to year and a half to have that up and operational, so that we do have an under USDA inspection, so that we do have, the opportunity to continue to be able to use as much of what we're yielding back as possible, because that is one of the number one most important things to being able to make a business like this work.
For sure. Okay, guys, we have several questions related to laws and licensing. So we're going to go through these. I would love input from anybody. I'll give my input as well. So Catherine asked a question related to licensing here in Texas. In particular, she's got questions about beef storage regulations. She says on the phone, she was told that she needed a full FDA kitchen, which includes following good manufacturing practices. However, she has also read that a facility that's solely engaged in storage of unexposed packaged food, some of these details we're gonna skip just a tiny bit. Maybe can be subject to modified requirements. They don't have to have that full FDA kitchen. She asked if anybody has any thoughts on that. The first thought that I would have for you, Catherine, is, and Casey, will you pull the link for us? We did a video interview with DSHS down in Austin, and I know that you've talked to them before. Check out that interview. We asked them a lot of these types of questions. See if that is helpful. The second thing I would tell you, because I dealt with this when I was writing the book, it's very frustrating to call down there and get different answers depending on who you get on the phone. We had a lot of luck with a woman named Milan Patel. We interviewed Milan on that video. She also graciously allowed us to put her phone number in our Where's the Beef handbook for direct beef sales producers to call and ask questions of her. So I would highly recommend getting a hold of Milan and seeing if she can give you a better answer to that question. I will say, John and Amanda, do either of you have an answer to this about the idea of the full FDA kitchen? I'm guessing it depends on how you're selling the beef. Like, I'm sure John, the answer for John and his store is different than if you just had it frozen and you're shipping it somewhere. But John, do you have any input there?
I don't know all the legal implications, but I do know when you start dealing in cooked product, you cross a really wide red line of government regulation.
Yeah.
A whole different world. But we contract out all that cooked stuff. So we send our fat to a company that makes the tallow. We send the chicken backs and chicken feed and that kind of thing to the same company, and they make our broths for us. So I'm not aware of, I know years ago when we first started and we were doing jerky, and we still do jerky, but once again, we contract that out because particularly on jerky, you have moisture requirements and a lot of stuff that gets really complicated. It gets to be where it's not worth the headache. So we contract all that out, and it's well worth going that route. And just to find a company that'll do that, there's quite a few of them out there. I don't think that's a big challenge, but I just when you start doing cooked product, it gets way more complicated than just raw product.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay, Amanda, any thoughts from you there?
Yeah, as far as like, we don't do like with our beef sticks or snack sticks, all that kind of stuff. It's all done through a processor. So we just ship out. So we never open packages. We're not doing any of that. So that was our understanding, is as long as we're not actually preparing any of that stuff, we're good to go. And we just had to have freezers in a separate location than like our home or something like that, and we could ship out of there. So
okay, Megan.
I've got maybe a little more clarity on that because we operate on both sides. So we have our storefront that is regulated by the state of New Mexico. The health department comes and regulates that store. And so all of our beef, no matter what channel it goes through, whether it's the retail store where we're selling that fresh chilled product, or the cuts that are done and packaged at the USDA facility, everything is slaughtered at the USDA facility. So it starts there. And we had a hard time getting answers back too from the state of New Mexico. And it was 2020 during COVID, it was impossible to get a hold of anyone. So I found a contact directly at the USDA, and I started at the federal side and worked my way down until I found somebody at the state with the USDA. And basically what their answer is, as long as you are storing product that is intact in a sealed package, that has a USDA label on it, where that you can prove that product corresponds to the bug that's on that package, and it's being stored at the appropriate temperature, and the facility in which it's being stored, I think he gave me a list of a couple of things, but basically they just want to make sure that there's no bugs and pests and things like that, that are going to interfere with that packaging, which then interferes with the quality of the product. So if you're just starting off and you're having somebody else cut and package your product, as long as it's done at a licensed facility, whether it's state inspected or USDA inspected, whatever your regulations are, depending on how you're selling it, what they would do, and we still operate this way. So I have a state representative from the USDA that comes to both our store and our house, which is where we have walk-ins at our house, and that's how we started. That is where our online product that is packaged and froze and sent back to us in individual cuts from the processor, that's kept at our house. So it's kept separate from the inventory we have at the store, just to keep things less confusing from a regulatory standpoint and easier for my employees. I have a guy that he randomly does a pop-up one time a year from the USDA, and he comes out, he checks, and makes sure the product in the box matches what the label says, that there's a USDA bug on it, that all the packaging is intact. He checks a couple of different boxes, and then he just kind of looks around the facility and makes sure that we've got, there's no bugs crawling around or rodents or anything like that, and that our temperatures are good. So really pretty simple, very laid back. There's not, from my understanding of it, unless we're missing out on something, not a ton of regulation from that standpoint. He does the same thing on the fresh side, where he comes and checks our coolers and freezers and checks the boxes and makes sure that there's a USDA stamp on everything. But then beyond that, we have the health department who comes in and really kind of goes through things with a fine tooth comb, because we are then opening up product from the USDA. It is no longer, it no longer has that guarantee of safety. We are then having to follow a different set of rules.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there is a big distinction between selling the product, like you said, the way it comes back packaged with the stamp from the processor. Once you start opening it up and doing different things, yeah, I think then there's a distinction. Catherine, you also had a question about federal regulation under the FDA about a facility holding food for consumption. I'd have to do some more looking into that. So you can feel free to reach out to me. I think, this is where I get dangerous when I'm thinking, okay? I think the answer is the same, that really applies to entities that are repackaging. That's where I've seen the issue of FDA regulation there come in. I think if you're repackaging, then that may be an issue. I think if you're just selling what you get back from the processor that's already been inspected and stamped, it does not come into play. Feel free to reach out to me, though, if you have more questions. Okay, we have a bunch of questions in the chat. Y'all keep those coming. I will keep reading them off. Also, Casey has put the evaluation in the chat. I know it's almost 1 o'clock. Some of you may have to hop off. Please do that evaluation before you leave, or sometime in the next couple of days. We're going to do a drawing for anybody who does that. We'll send out a free copy of our Where's the Beef handbook to a lucky winner. So if you do the evaluation, you're in a drawing for the handbook. Okay, here's a question, and I'd like to get Megan, probably your perspective on this. He wants to know how long you feed out grain in order to get the marbling content high enough for tender choice cuts. And since you do conventional grain fed, Megan, we're going to let you weigh in there.
Yeah, so it really kind of depends on the time of year and what our inventory is looking like and that kind of thing. We do a minimum of 120 days on the grain finish. I know some people do a little less. I know usually most people are shooting for at least 100 days. And it just kind of depends too. We do 120 to sometimes 175 on average, but it also it depends on the cattle and the quality and how they're finishing out individually. My husband runs the live cattle side of the business, and then I run the meat side, but we'll kind of collectively go out there every couple of weeks together and get an idea of, what our live inventory looks like and which ones we're going to cherry pick out for the beef side, for the meat side of the business, and then which ones we're going to sell back to the packers or into another yard. So generally that's kind of where we try to hit. Sometimes, in slower seasons in the meat market, we end up feeding them out much longer than what we need to, which isn't a great place to be in. But, as we've grown, we've found some ways to mitigate that. But I would say at least that 120 days on a good grain ration seems to work well for us. Sometimes if you're overfeeding them, what we'll see is, you can do that. And sometimes, you've got cattle that visually you think are going to grade really well, and then they just don't. And so you've got a lot more money tied up in them. Also, the ones that we've fed out for too long, what we're seeing is by the time they hit the counter, that eye kind of shrinks back. So you do have a ton of marbling, But that fat kind of starts to consume the actual red meat that you're able to sell, and then they're not quite as marketable either. So it's finding a good balance between the two.
Okay, related question, and I want Megan and John both to answer this. What is the average live weight of the steers that you process to sell? So again, Megan, conventional producer that does grass-fed, grain finished. Average live weight of the steers that you process.
I can look at the sheet on cattle or carcasses we just unloaded this morning, and they go anywhere from 667 to 813.
Okay, and
So-
so that's grass-fed cattle.
Yes, grass fed.
Yeah. Okay.
Live weight on these cattle, we're doing about 55% on the dressing percentage, and that's with no pencil shrink, none of that. That's just, and when we gather cattle, my son and I do this every Wednesday. That's our routine. We gather cattle and ship them to the harvest facility every Wednesday, and our live weights the last 6 months have been about 1,200 to 1,250.
Okay.
And so that 55%, so whatever that is.
Okay, and then John, I've got somebody else who's asking the age of the cattle as well, average age.
Kind of as what Megan alluded to, that depends on when I need them. The good thing about grass-fed cattle, we can just leave them out there and don't really worry about overfinish. But from 20 to 24 months is the answer.
Okay, perfect. Megan, same questions for you, average weight and age. And I know you've got a spreadsheet that gives you all this information.
Garrett's got access to that. We use the Microtech because of the way our yard is set up. So what's really nice, and I don't know if some of you guys maybe use performance beef. That's a little better suited for some smaller operations if you're not in like a feed yard setting. But those are really great ways to hone in on being able to track kind of days on feed and where you're at on estimated weights and things like that, so that you can be really, really precise on your cost. Which is super, super important. If you're not using a program like that, make sure you've got a spreadsheet that's calculating those things for you. So typically we're killing them a little bit on the larger side. On average, somewhere around 1,400 to 1,450. From that, and our carcass weights average as well. Sometimes we're killing them, again, depending on the time of year, we're getting up there in the high 1,500s, which isn't a place that we want to be. But again, it happens sometimes. And so usually we're trying to yield back at least 500 pounds of sellable product. That may not all be red meat. That's a little bit, that's bones, that's fat. It's different things that we're keeping back. But on average, 1,400 to 1,450. And then, that's yielding us about 500 pounds of product. And then we're, breaking it down and figuring it out from there.
Okay. And age-wise?
About 24 to 28 months.
Okay. John, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I just looked on the cattle that came in today. Their live weight was 1,200 pounds on the nose average. Carcasses were 713 pounds average, and that's a 59.5% dressing percent.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, Amanda, it is your time to shine. Josh wants to know about the laws and regulations required in order to sell the tallow skincare products. And I know you know this because you asked me and I had no idea. So
yeah, I was like, please help. So we looked into, and I'm sure, I don't know if it's different in different states or how that works, but at least here in Texas, I actually just pulled up the article a second ago, so I was looking through it. So you can do the food cottage license thing that we actually don't have to have that for rendering. So I think they used to do that. And for Texas on rendering, if you're rendering down any type of fats and stuff, that you actually don't have to have a separate license.
okay.
So
And an important point you made earlier, I want to hit on this. You said earlier, you just kind of breezed by it because it's second nature to you, but you said we can't make any claims. Explain what that means.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like the FDA, it's not seen by any of that kind of stuff. So I can't say, oh, it's gonna heal your psoriasis or your eczema or anything like that. But we just really boost out like all of the testimonies from the people that have actually used it, that have, like my stepsister, her hands literally bleed. They're covered in eczema. And she uses like our tallow body butter and her hands are fully clear. So I'll show pictures and I just use people's testimonies to kind of like promote how it helps people and how it works. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward here in Texas. I took a little while to figure that out because I wasn't sure on what the licenses and what the rules were. But I think it said on the on the website that they changed the laws like recently, that now for rendering, you actually don't have to have anything separate.
Okay, perfect.
Is that just for skincare or food grade too?
So it actually, it doesn't specify in the article. I actually have it right here. Because we were talking about that a second ago. Yeah, so it says, when was this? This is on the texas.gov website, and it says rendering establishments and meat safety. It says the elimination of rendering license requirements. So they got rid of that, and it doesn't say anything about skincare. So that's just rendering businesses, that rendering down raw materials for unprocessed, partially processed materials of animal, for cooking oil, any of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of for everything.
Interesting. Okay. If anybody wants to double check that, because you're paranoid like me, right?
Yeah.
I would call and talk to Dr. James Dillon. He's the head of the Meat Safety Assurance Unit. He came, I think, Amanda, maybe to one of the Where's the Beef classes you guys came to. He's very helpful and likes to, chat with producers. So that's a good contact for everybody. Casey, can you pull his info for the chat as well? Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Here's a question, Megan. I know you have a spiel on this. We'll have you give it. And John and Amanda, I'd like to know from you as well. What software are you using to run your online sales websites? Megan, I think it's the same answer for the store. So go ahead and tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I just dropped that in the chat, but we use Shopify for online shop. And I'll be totally honest, once we open the doors to our, meat market, that has consumed so much of our time and bandwidth that I've just, for the last year and a half, I think it's shown that all of our stuff online is out of stock. So if you check out our website, we're working on redoing the website, and we're going to get back into shipping probably closer to Christmas. But I don't do a lot of sales through the website just because we're moving so much product through another channel. And I don't have enough help to be able to manage it. But Shopify is what we use. It's super user-friendly. If you're looking to save cost and not pay somebody else to develop a website, really easy templates, easy to get started shipping. When we started, we had a UPS account. And so we got a UPS small business account. We were shipping through them. It was great at first. You give them an estimate of how much you think you're going to send. But what they do is they reevaluate that ever so often. And so you may start off with a really great discount, but when they do that reevaluation, if it falls on a slow order or sales week, then your discount changes throughout the year. And so what we found was if we just shipped and bought our labels, whether it was FedEx or UPS directly through Shopify, you get one large discount that stays consistent. So that's one thing that I would recommend, because sometimes when you start, you have reps that come in that, try to get you to start an account with them. We have not found anybody that we've been able to beat those Shopify shipping prices. We're super rural too, so shipping is very difficult for us. We don't have access to dry ice consistently. It takes a lot longer for our packages to get out than it would, around the Dallas metro area. So we run into a lot of logistical hurdles on the shipping side. But Shopify has simplified that for us. When we started the store, we used Shopify's retail point of sale system. We outgrew that within about 6 months. It just wasn't set up for a grocery store meat market type setting. It's really great if you're selling, clothes or shoes or things at one individual unit price. It's very user friendly. It ties into your website. That's great. But because our products are so separate, I sell certain things online, and then we have a much wider variety of stuff we sell through the store. It kind of complicated things. So we had to have 2 different inventory management programs when it came down to it. Anyways, what we use now in the store for somebody who's, considering going that route, we use Toast point of sale. It's set up, if you may recognize that or start to recognize it when you go to restaurants or fast food chains and things like that. They use Toast. It's specifically set up for bars and restaurants, but they're now moving into food retail a little bit. So that's the one thing that I've found, that the one point of sale system or operating system that is closest to meeting our needs not being a full-fledged grocery store, but not being a restaurant. We fall in this like weird in-between space on a lot of things when it comes to, you know, state regulatory stuff or software or different things that we need. So we kind of have to shoehorn things to get it to fit our needs. But that's where we're at now. We used QuickBooks point of sale for a little while, but that was kind of a disaster.
Okay. Amanda, will you talk to us about the software that you use, and then also talk to us about shipping and shipping costs? That's another question. Since that's the majority of your business is that online sales, talk to us about both of those things.
Yeah, we use Shopify as well, and we've really enjoyed it. There's so many, like there's really so much in there that you can, I don't know, all the analytics, all just tracking everything. It's really user friendly. So that's pretty straightforward. Same thing as Megan. And then for shipping, yeah, shipping costs, we found, I think you were the one who told us about that, Megan, about going through Shopify for their shipping rates. And so obviously the customer pays that and everything. And so that's the best rates that we've found. And then we do 1 day and 2 day shipping. And the dry ice thing, I mean, it's complicated to just make sure you're getting enough in there, especially in the summer months. But we kind of found a good rhythm of that. We use cold keepers, which are like insulators that go inside of the box that keep everything nice and cold. We've tried a few other ones and did some test packages along the way, and even recently looked into switching to a different brand that was a little more cost effective, and we had things showing up thought out. So maybe in the cooler months, we may be able to switch insulators for a little bit and then have to go back. But the cold keepers work really nice. You obviously want like a heavyweight box to really make sure that that's heavy duty enough so that it withstands shipping, especially on some big orders. We've had a lot of big orders that the box just gets kind of beat up. So you want to have like a nice box. But yeah, the dry ice and the insulator and the box, all of that together can get pricey for sure. We are obviously a small operation as well. And so once you start doing more volume on dry ice and stuff, you get some breaks on pricing, just like kind of anything. But you know, you can have some handling fees in there where that can kind of be put onto the customer a little bit for some of that cost, but we do take on a little bit of that as well. I mean, just because our prices are already premium, and it's like you don't want to add on so much more on that as well. But yeah, you know, with the beef sticks and the tallow, I'm telling you, being able to ship with no dry ice, I'm like, this is a piece of cake. This is awesome.
So much easier.
So inexpensive.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
John, thoughts from you on software?
Well, my disclaimer is you're talking to the wrong person. We're kind of the same way. I take care of them when they're alive, and maybe take care of them when they're dead. But we do shipping. We don't do dry ice. We used to, and that is a royal pain.
Yeah.
We buy the shipping containers that are thicker, kind of like if anybody on here is in the cattle business, like they would ship pharmaceuticals in, so they hold the cold. And then we ship on Monday, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays, depending on whether it's a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day delivery, so it gets there intact. It's kind of ironic that we're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and with stores in Dallas and Fort Worth, most of our shipping is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is kind of strange, but it's that way. And I think that's kind of the mindset of today, thanks to Amazon, that people don't want to go to the store. So we use EPOS as our point of sale in the stores. It's a challenge when you go online with it. We try to cut steaks where we can just do a per steak price, which we still do, because when it's by the pound and you want people to be able to close out an online sale while they're ordering, you have to have per piece pricing as opposed to per pound pricing, because it's because you just don't want to weigh it, then price it, then charge them later.
Right.
Also, with the vast majority of our sales going through our stores, we probably haven't pursued the shipping like we could have. And is that an area where we could probably up our game? Yeah, probably. But the costs have gotten so expensive. The containers and then cardboard, since Amazon's gone through the roof. Our box cost for just our normal beef boxes that we pack beef in, gone through the roof, probably 4 times as expensive it was pre-COVID. Shipping costs have gone way up. And so we don't chase the online thing probably quite as hard as we could.
Okay. Okay. Okay, now I have a question for you because you said you are the live cattle guy. Someone has asked, what are the benefits and drawbacks of buying stocker cattle for direct beef sales rather than having your own breeding program where you're raising the calves?
Well, I got an opinion on that. If you're going to spend the time, the effort, the money, everything else to direct market, I can't stress genetics enough. And when you're buying stocker cattle in the sale barn or wherever, one, because there are no antibiotics, no ionophores, no implants, strictly grass, all that. Well, we don't know any history on the cattle. I mean, we don't raise all these cattle. We do buy them, but then the producers that we buy cattle from that we finish on grass follow our strict protocol, and they're people I've done business with for years. But if you've invested in those genetics and you don't finish the cattle to capitalize on those genetics, you're leaving a lot of money on the table, because we talked about how long to get marbling and that kind of thing earlier. Well, if you don't have the genetics to do that, you can feed them forever and they're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think the answer is genetics, and know what the genetics are and know the history on the cattle. I think that's important. And you can have the best genetics in the world, and you're always going to have some animals that come through that aren't as good as the other one. They're all different.
Sure.
And so I'd say genetics, and capitalize on those genetics, and then feed them whichever grass or grain, whatever you're doing, make sure that they're finished to capitalize on those genetics that you've invested in.
Okay. Megan, thoughts from you on that?
I agree with everything that he said. When we started with us being primarily a stocker operation, we were involved in a lot of different programs. So we were doing stuff that was the NHTC, we were doing all natural, we had a lot of different options. And so what we started doing was, again, cherry picking some of the better cattle with better genetics that were coming off of those ranches and into our yard, and finishing those ones out, feeding them separate, finishing them out separate, specifically for our meat program. And then we do a little bit of cow calf too. And so as the meat business has grown, the direction that we're going in is trying to be that fully integrated by the time we get our processing facility up, that we're paying more attention to the genetics from day one, and running them all the way through. But also for us to be a part of this New Mexico grown program, we're buying from New Mexico producers that we're, consistently buying off of their ranches and then bringing them into our yard at a certain stage. And so, we have good relationships and good ties with those guys where we know, a lot more about their vaccination programs, or, what the processes look like before they've entered onto our property, and where we have more control of it from there on. And so, again, to his point, though, genetics play such a crucial role when it comes down to the end product and the quality.
Okay, got it. Here's a question that is very specific, and I'll tell you my answer is I would call Milan if it was me with this question, but I'll see if you guys know. In your freezers, can you use a digital thermometer sensor that hooks up through Wi-Fi, or do you have to have a scientific circle chart thermometer to track the temperature? I for sure don't know. Milan is who I would call. Anybody have any experience with that?
I do.
John, hit us.
Because we have our own plant, so we have a HACCP program, hazardous critical and control points. And I mean, you can use any thermometer you want, and we just have to calibrate those on a regular basis to make sure that they're accurate. We also have a remote digital thermometer because we have so much cooling between 2 processing plants and 3 stores. And so in an app, and it's called Zynect, Zynect. So we can pull up on our phone at any time, or we get an alert if a temperature goes above a certain preset limit that we put on there. But as far as FSIS, Food Safety Inspection Service, We can use any type of thermometer we want, but they just have to be calibrated on a regular basis and documented. Everything's documented with FSIS.
Yeah. Listen, John, you're really running a risk here of me trying to tell everybody to call John instead of call Milan if you keep answering
No,
questions
don't do
like that. So beware, beware. Okay. The next question back, Amanda, back to the tallow question. He says, thanks for the info on rendering the tallow. In order to sell it as balms, lotions, etc., are there any other regulations or licenses you have to follow? I'm not aware of any. Amanda, I want to give you a chance to pipe in here if you are.
Like I said, everything I researched and read, there was not. But now you're making me want to call that guy and just confirm.
Yeah.
But from everything I could find, there was no extra license I had to have. Let her say hi.
Oh, Amanda has a helper. Hello. Hi.
Yeah. Want to say hi?
We do want, and John, any thoughts there from you?
Yeah, we also do, we have some people that make soap for us out of the tallow, and we do a lip balm, and I'm not aware of anything. And
Okay.
as many regulatory people as we deal with, if somebody hasn't said something up to this point, then I'm going to say that there's not.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay, perfect. Okay, so two things I want to do here really quick. First of all, I do want to thank Amanda because y'all listen, Amanda is pitch hitting today with about 2 hours notice. She was not originally scheduled to be on the webinar. So we thank her for hopping in and doing this for us after another panelist had to hop out. I do want to give us, we're down to the last 10 minutes here. I do want to see if anybody wants to unmute and ask any questions verbally instead of in the chat box. I also want to remind you, Casey just put it one more time, that link to the quick Qualtrics evaluation. If y'all would fill that out, that'd be great. So anybody want to unmute and ask a question?
I'll unmute and just say thank you guys. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for your great questions as well. Okay, let's do this. I don't see anyone else unmuting, so let's do this. I just want to give everybody just a brief, 2-3 minutes to just say anything else that you had thought about or you think people need to hear today that we didn't cover. So, John, let's start with you.
Boy, I do want to, I'd like to say one thing I don't think we covered was special claims.
Yeah.
And when I talk about special claims on a label, say it's grass-fed, no antibiotics, Texas beef, Angus beef, any of that, those claims have to be, they go through FSIS for approval.
That's right.
So anything you want to do like that, be aware of that going in and work with your processor on that. A lot of that they can do in-house with their inspector, but some of the others, such as grass-fed, will need to go through Washington, and it takes a little time to get that done.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great point. And we do have a chapter on that in the book as well. And we did an interview with Clinton Sons, which is a processor in the Panhandle, and we talked about that exact issue. So thank you for raising that, John. That's something we did not cover. Okay, Megan?
Yeah, so I think two things that come to mind that I would really stress is, success in direct beef sales is going to look different for everybody based on your goals. So, it's not, we are now in a totally different place than I would have ever expected us to be, which is great. But I think we went into it with this vision of our business is going to look like this, hopefully in 5 to 10 years. And now it's something totally different, which is completely fine. But you can consider it to be a success if you're just selling, set a certain amount of wholes and halves a year, or maybe it's shipping only, or maybe your end goal is to have a processing facility or to have a retail store, have 2 retail stores, whatever that might be. I think just setting a goal and a clear vision to get there. But in order to make it work, no matter what size of business that you've got set as that goal, you have to be really, really, really focused in on, your cost and your profit margins. And I think that that's one thing that I've seen a lot of people make mistakes, especially those that, are just feeding a few out here and there throughout the year. Is, I see a lot of people selling whole and half beeves that are sack feeding and finishing them out that way. and they're underselling them significantly. So you're selling a premium product, you're selling a product with a story behind it. Make sure that you're reaping the benefits from that and that you're really keeping a close eye on what those cost of goods are. I think people aren't as granularly focused in on that, and that might seem okay within the first year to 2 years, but you hit that third year and then you're realizing, okay, why am I not making any money? So, one thing that we kind of do as a general rule of thumb, especially now, that we've got the retail store, because we're moving a lot of different products all the time, is we use the 30-30-20 rule. So we try to keep our inventory and cost of goods at around 30%, labor's around 30%, and then everything else is in that 20% range. So my marketing spend, other bills and things like that outside of our feed cost and processing cost, I would loop that into the cost of goods sold. And then that should ideally at the end of the day yield you a 20% profit. And so looking at it from that big picture and kind of grouping your costs in there and figuring out, where do you need to trim the fat, is a good way to kind of keep a handle on it. For us, since we do have a little bit more versatility and flexibility, we shoot for at least a 40% markup on everything. That's pretty standard when it comes to retail grocery. Because we're moving more, we're making our money in volume now, as opposed to, smaller granular sales. And we have to be able to still we are selling a premium product, but we're also focused on trying to be as competitive as we can, with the local stores in the area. And so we're not pricing ourselves out of that either. So we've found, 40% on most of our products is kind of the sweet spot. But that's going to look different to everybody depending on your location and your access to feed resources and your processing costs and all of those things, and kind of how your operation is set up. But that 30-30-20 rule that we learned within the last couple of years has been a game changer for us, just really being able to keep a handle on things.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. And Amanda, we will let you give your any final thoughts you've got. Like you said, it's your 1-year anniversary tomorrow.
I know, it's kind of crazy. We've certainly learned a lot. It's been a lot of fun. I love the ag industry so much. And you've just been such a big help to us, and your book and the seminars, everything's been awesome. So we're just so appreciative of that. But yeah, I mean, I think y'all both covered a lot of good things. The thing I was going to say, and then Megan kind of said it, was just, I think we all go into things with an idea of what it's going to look like. And I think not being afraid to pivot when that's necessary or it makes more sense, not standing, your stake in the ground so hardcore that you tank the whole thing either. So I think you've got to just be flexible and say, what's really working? What are our customers loving? What isn't working? And being able to flush the things that aren't and really run with the things that are. And I think, you just keep moving forward. So I think there's a number of things that we didn't expect along the way that look a little different now than what we initially intended, but it's it's all for the better, and so it's just been a really big learning process. And I love these kinds of things. Thank you for hosting this, because I learned a lot today just listening to you guys talk as well. And so, yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Okay, guys, well, we have about 3 minutes left. So if you have any final questions, you can pop them in the chat. The other thing I'll remind you is our beef video series, which we linked to at the beginning. You can find it on YouTube. We did longer form interviews with each of the panelists today, as well as additional producers. So please feel free to check those out. They're available on YouTube. And we'll put a link here. Casey's already got it in the chat box. So again, thank y'all so much for coming. Thank you for your kind comments in the chat. We really appreciate it. To Megan, Amanda, and John, thank you so much for coming, for giving us your time, for sharing your expertise. We really appreciate you all as well. Okay, with that, we will call it a webinar. Thank y'all very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.